Alright YouTube, so another day, another bit of info regarding the 9 Remake from Midori. She dropped quite a bit of info late last night. Looking at the time the tweets were sent out is when I was doing the rebirth patch video. We would have done a third video yesterday anyways. We would have saved it for today regardless. Several bits about the game, like how far along development is, them bringing development in-house, it potentially releasing within the fiscal year, things like that. It's not just about the 9 Remake either, even though that is kind of the focus of the video. She does mention that there's going to be Square Enix games at the upcoming Xbox Showcase, which is kind of exciting. So we're just going to hop right into it. The Final Fantasy IX Remake is still in development. It is a title that was not canceled in the restructure of Square Enix during this fiscal year. According to conversations, the title was originally outsourced to another developer, but Square Enix was not satisfied and development shifted. For those that might not be aware, this is something we actually seen with the 7 Remake. Initially, the game was being developed by CyberConnect 2, and I think around like 2017 or so, Square Enix just didn't like what they were doing, or they weren't far enough along in the project, or something along those lines, and they just switched it in-house, which I prefer. I mean, especially for something like the 7 Remake. I love 9, but with the 7 Remake, like, if you're going to remake that game, I feel like Square Enix should be the ones remaking it, not just some other company. And it seems like maybe there's a similar thing happening with the 9 Remake, which might give us an idea of, like, the scale of the project, because if it was just, like, a simple visual remake or whatever, I don't know why they'd have to, outsource it and be like, oh, I don't like what you're doing, bring it in-house, right? Because that's not necessarily like hard in the grand scheme of things. But the fact that they've maybe felt the need to bring it in-house means maybe there's a little bit of effort being put behind the project. We do have an idea of kind of what the remake might be according to Midori, which we'll look at eventually in the video. She further goes on to say, development of this title is now very far along, but I do not have any firm information on the scope of this title or a firm release period right now. This title could release before the end of this fiscal year, but I am not certain right now. So development being far along is something we talked about yesterday, because, I mean, obviously the remake's been known since like 2021, so they've been developing it for a couple of years. I think we talked about it yesterday with some of the information that she gave us. Her not knowing the full scope of the title is something that she kind of elaborates on to reply to a tweet, which we'll read probably here in a second. The game potentially releasing within the fiscal year is pretty exciting, because we're obviously less than a year till the fiscal year is over. It ends next March, so we have like 9-month window roughly potentially for this game to release, which would be nice. And I think it can make a bit of sense depending on the scale and the scope of the 9 Remake, because we don't have anything like major coming out this fiscal year, right? Other than the 14 DLC coming out this summer. Like, because Rebirth dropped, but that was at the end of February. The fiscal year ends on March. So a lot of the sales of Rebirth would have been through pre-orders at the very end of February and all throughout March, right? And that contributed to the last fiscal year. So there's nothing like super major coming out as far as we're aware throughout this fiscal year. So the 9 Remake could be something that could help them. And the final tweet within her initial thread says, there are plans for new information on some Square Enix titles at the Xbox Showcase. I don't know if this title will be at the showcase, so it is good to keep expectations low right now. And this is a title that is currently planned for release on multiple platforms. So that's kind of exciting that we're going to get some Square Enix games on Xbox. I don't know if that means like brand new upcoming games that are going to be released on that platform, or exclusive games like the 7 Remake project, like 16 coming to that platform as well. Maybe a combination of both. But if the 9 Remake is supposed to be multi-platform, that's not something they can just like switch on the dime, right? Because if you're building it exclusively for like PS5 or PS4, PS5, whatever they wanted to do, like you can't just be like, oh, I guess we'll throw it on Xbox too, because you have to develop it for Xbox, you have to develop it for PC and shit like that, right? Maybe it was always planned to be a multi-platform release, which I think, again, makes some sense, because we've seen what they've been doing with exclusives for a while now. And just in general, with a project like that, you don't know how successful it's going to be. Obviously, 9 is the highest rated Final Fantasy game. It has a lot of fans, but it didn't initially sell well on the PlayStation, right? Because it's at the tail end of the PlayStation leading into the PS2. Like, I definitely prefer 9 over 8, and that's not throwing any shade at 8, because I do think it's a good game, but it's just kind of controversial, right? But, like, Final Fantasy VIII sold significantly better than 9. Now, part of that is it was following Final Fantasy VII, so there's a lot of hype and anticipation. But still, like, as good as 9 is, it didn't even sell as good as 8. So moving on to some of her replies, this person says, did it shift to in-house at Square Enix? And she replies with, Final Fantasy IX Remake is being developed in the house like carpet at Square Enix. So here's where we get the clarification that it was switched to in-house, because her previous thread just said that it was outsourced to somebody, and then the development shifted. So that could have meant like it shifted to a different developer, but they did bring it in-house, which is nice. So this is another great piece of information. The first person says, do you know if it will be action-based or turn-based? Another person replies, this is a question I would like to see answered to, hoping for turn-based, to which she says, the gameplay is turn-based. Which this is obviously great to hear. This is kind of a big concern for a lot of us. Like, I love what they're doing with the combat system with the 7 Remake project. They found like a really nice pocket of like action with the ATB system and all that other shit, right? I love that. But if you're going to remake like another Final Fantasy, I would like it to be more true to form, and that seems to be what is happening here. Them keeping the traditional combat, it would seem, can kind of give us an idea of like the scale of the project as well. Like it's not them trying to completely change it or make it like the 7 Remake project, right? They're trying to keep it like it was originally, just more modern. Actually, speaking of the combat really quickly, if there's one thing I would change in the 9 Remake in terms of combat from the original game, is the trance mode. I just don't want it to be forced. I've never been a fan of that. As much as I love 9, I never liked that, like, as soon as your trance bar fills or whatever, like, you just automatically change. You're automatically forced to use it. I prefer, like, the limit breaks and overdrive systems from other games where you can kind of hold it and use it. Obviously, if you're going up to a boss fight, you can, like, grind with some random enemies and get your bar almost all the way if you wanted to. But just in general, I've just never been a fan of it activating by itself. And I believe last up for the video here, we have this reply where this person says, hold on, when I hear the word remake, I imagine graphics on par with Final Fantasy VII Remake. For Final Fantasy IX Remake, will it be like that, or is it going to be a simple remake like Octopath Traveler or Star Ocean? It was similar in style to Trials of Mana in many different ways for a period of time. It is a remake that is a little higher than a Mana remake. It is not HD 2D style, but it's also not FF7R style. So that's where we get kind of an idea of what the scale of the game is. It's not trying to be like 7 Remake. It's very similar to like Trials of Mana. It's a bit of a weird comparison just because the Trials of Mana remake is very different from like a 9 on PS1 to like a 9 Remake Modern, just because those like Super Nintendo 2D sprites into like 3D, right? Whereas like obviously Final Fantasy IX was sort of 3D, at least in combat, and when you're walking around the world, it's different than like 7 where you're kind of just walking on an image, right? Like there's some 3D shit, you can kind of go behind objects and things like that, whatever. But she does say that it's more than a Mana remake, but not quite FF7. It's not HD 2D, which so maybe it's going to get a full-on 3D remake, but maybe keeping it pretty much just FF9 on PlayStation, just all 3D, which would be kind of cool. Like where you can walk around the world. You're not just one static camera angle and you're walking around the area. Like maybe you can rotate the camera and all that shit. That'd be fucking awesome. And I actually hadn't really thought about it until now, but with them doing like, modern remake that's more than a Mana, but less than like FF7 Remake, I wonder how they'd update the world map. I wonder if they would like change it at all or add stuff to it, more things to do in the world type shit. Right? I don't know. I believe that's kind of it for the video. I've looked kind of through her reply section on Twitter to see if there's anything that I missed, but I don't see anything. So it's all massive information, like the biggest info dump we've had so far for the 9 Remake in terms of kind of everything. Development moving in-house, release window potentially, what kind of combat it's going to be, the kind of scale of the project. A lot of stuff, man. Now we just play the waiting game. She said to keep our expectations low, of course, but she did say that there's Square Enix has some reveals at the Xbox Showcase, so let's see. And we got Summer Game Fest coming up. This game's pretty far along in development, might release within the fiscal year. There's only 9 months left in the fiscal year. If they want to announce the 9 Remake and kind of hype it and market it, I mean, it's kind of the perfect time to do it, so let's see what happens. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, so snarks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DaveYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.